Good morning, scholars, and welcome back to Learning with Mrs. Prevey. Today we are working on Fairy Tales, Lesson 4, The Frog and the Prince. Our learning goal for today is I can describe how the princess feels when her golden toy falls into a well and how the frog feels when the princess lets him into the castle using words and phrases that suggest feelings. So during our course of fairy tales, we've read the stories of Sleeping Beauty, Rumpelstiltskin, and Rapunzel. We met a lot of different kinds of characters. We've learned that fairy tales usually have realistic-like characters or characters that are based on real life, and they also have magical characters. As we walk through our stories, we're taking a look, and we're seeing a royal family here with a king and a queen and the princess. In this story, we also had these fairies, and fairies are magical creatures that can't really exist. But the queen and the princess, they are realistic like characters. Let's keep looking at our characters in these stories. We talked about the old woman and that this could happen in real life. There could be old women. Okay. And then here comes the prince. Prince is part of the royal family. And there are princes today. There are plenty of princesses. So here we are. Now when we get down to the story of Rumpelstiltskin, there's yet another king, and this is the miller. We talked about how these were real life characters. King is part of the royal family, but the miller's not. Here's a miller's daughter. A miller could have a daughter, and she could be a real type of person. But then we talked about the magical character, this little man, and we said that little men don't really exist. All right. And that the queen could definitely have a baby, and that baby would be the princess. That the palace, the royal family often had servants and other people to help them, and that's a real thing. Now, when we get down to the story of Rapunzel, here, this is just a man and a woman. And in real life, we see lots of men and lots of women. Okay. But the witch, now, there's no such thing as a witch, so this is a magical character we call magical characters. Okay, the little girl could be a realistic-like character. And here's another prince, and that could happen in real life too. Here we go, the prince and the girl could definitely meet, fall in love. Okay. We're still looking at our characters. A lot of pictures of the prince and Rapunzel. Okay. Very good. All right. I want you to take a look at this picture here. This is the good fairy, right? The good fairy there. And then I want you to take a look at this character, Rumpelstiltskin. And I wonder what the good fairy and Rumpelstiltskin have in common. Both the good fairy and Rumpelstiltskin can make some kind of magic thing happen. Okay? That's not really something that happens in real life, but in fairy tales it's very common. So then what does this character, Rumpelstiltskin, and this character, the witch, have in common? They both want to take the queen's first child. They both bargain for the queen's first child. Fairy tales often have magical characters and special powers. Fairy tales also often have royal characters. We heard about in the three fairy tales we've heard about different royal characters, such as the prince and the kings and the queens. Okay. Today's story is called The Frog Prince. What royal character is mentioned in that title? Yeah, the prince. So I want you to think about the prince the different princes that we've heard about in these stories we've already read, such as this one right here in the story of Rapunzel. So let's think about what the importance was of this prince in this story. In the end, the prince rescues Rapunzel down here. He rescues Rapunzel right here, and he takes her away to the castle. He marries her, and they live happily ever after. And then in this story right here, think about what the significance is of this prince. Yes, he kisses her and wakes her up, and then he marries her. Very good. So, if these princes are alike, let's see, in what ways are these princes alike? So, they're both the son of a king, and they live happily ever after, and they are good guys. There's lots of ways they're actually alike, okay? So I want you to take a look at this picture here. So think about what you see in this picture. And when we met recently, we talked about the sound that a frog makes. Usually when we ask what sound a frog makes, we might hear a lot of ribbits, but I want to remind you, what song does the bullfrog make? That's a silly sound, isn't it? But not all frogs sound the same way. That frog sounds very different, doesn't it? But most of the time when we say, what sound does a frog make, we usually say what? Ribbit, ribbit. Yeah. What do you think frogs like to eat? Did you know that frogs like to eat bugs? Yep, they stick their long tongue out and just get a bug. So when you touch a frog, what do you think this frog is going to feel like? Yeah, they're normally kind of slimy. Yep. Bumpy, slimy. What does it look like? Well, there's lots of different kinds of frogs, but this frog is green and black. But not all frogs are green and black. There's plenty of different kinds. They usually look like they feel kind of bumpy and slimy, like wet almost. So today's story is The Frog Prince. So based on what you know about frogs and what you have learned about royalty or princes, what do you think a frog prince might look like? And what do you think he might do? So you need to make a prediction of whether the frog prince is more like a frog or more like the princes that you have heard about in other fairy tales. Listen carefully to find out whether or not your predictions are correct. And some of you may have already heard the story of the Frog Prince, but you should listen to see how this version might be a little different from what you've heard before. Once upon a time, a mighty king lived in a palace in the shadow of a dark, mysterious forest. He had only one child, a beautiful little girl with long, flowing hair, and her favorite plaything was a bright golden ball that looked just like the sun in the sky. Day after day she would run and skip under the shadow of the huge forest trees, tossing and bouncing her ball to amuse herself. She liked to pretend that her ball was indeed the sun, and that the whole wide world was hers to play with. One day, however, as she spun the ball in her little hands, it slipped from her fingers, rolled over the leafy ground, and fell, splash, into a deep well. A well is a deep hole that has been dug in order to get water. She ran quickly to the edge of the well and peered in, but her beautiful golden toy had vanished into the darkness. How do you think that the princess feels? Have you ever lost a favorite toy? She began to cry loudly because she was not used to disappointment, when she suddenly heard a timid, scratchy voice behind her say, "What is the matter, princess?" Spinning around, she realized that the speaker was the ickiest frog she had ever seen. "I have dropped my ball into the well and it is lost forever," she wailed. Wailed is another way of saying cried loudly. The frog looked at her and blinked. "I could get it for you if—" "Oh, Froggy, I'd give you anything you want if you could get my lovely ball back. You could have my crown." "I do not want your crown," the frog said. "Or all my jewels," she offered. What would a frog do with your jewels, he wondered. "I do not care," the princess snapped. "Just get my ball." "Well," the frog said, "I do not want jewels, but I do want a friend. It is a lonely life being an achy frog. If I fetch your ball from the dark, chilly well for you, will you agree to be my friend forever afterwards, and love me and share everything that you have with me?" Do you think the princess is going to agree? Of course, the princess promised, but in her heart she thought, who cares what that old frog wants? He'll never leave this well anyway. The frog did not know her thoughts, however, and he dived eagerly into the well. A few seconds later, he emerged from the water, holding the precious golden ball between two slimy webbed hands. "It was very cold down there," the frog remarked, but the princess was not listening. Why do you think this princess wasn't listening? "Hooray!" she cried, and seizing the ball, she immediately ran back to the palace. The frog croaked after her, "Wait! I cannot run as fast as you." She ignored him, however, and considered the matter settled. What do you think the matter? Do you think the matter is settled? Why or why not? That night, however, while the court feasted, a loud knock sounded on the door. The court, including the royal family and the people who helped them. Who do you think's at the door? The princess loved visitors, so she ran to open the door, but who should stand on the palace stairs but the icky, warty frog? She slammed the door in his face and ran back to her delicious dinner on her golden plate. Behind the heavy wooden door, though, she could hear him croaking, "Oh, careful, careful, Princess Fair. Promises are more than air." Fair means to be charming or otherwise pleasing. "Who was at the door, my daughter?" asked the king. "Nobody, just an old frog," she said. And then she told him how the frog had retrieved her ball from the well, or how the frog had gotten her ball from the well, on the condition that she would be its friend and share everything she had with it forever afterwards. She thought her father would be pleased with how she had escaped the frog's demands, but to her surprise, he frowned. Daughter, we must keep the promises we make. What kind of kingdom would we have if we all treated each other the way you have treated this poor frog? The frog kept his promise to you, and he helped you. Now you must keep your promise to him. Go and let him in. The princess was shocked and wanted to refuse, but she could see from her father's stern look that she had to obey. Unwillingly, she got up and opened the door. The frog was still sitting patiently on the steps of the palace. When he saw the princess, he smiled happily. A smiling frog is quite a sight to behold, and bounced up and down with a little froggy glee. The frog bounced up and down with joy or happiness. What do you think is going to happen? Were your predictions correct about what the frog prince might look like? At the beginning of the fairy tale, what happens to the princess's golden ball? Yeah, it fell into a deep well. How does the princess feel about that? She was so sad that she wails or cries. But why is she crying? Because that was her favorite plaything or toy. Who offers to help the princess? Yep, a frog. How do you think the princess feels when she turns around and sees the frog? Probably pretty surprised or shocked, huh? What does the princess have to promise in order to get the frog to retrieve the ball? Yep, she had to promise to be a friend, to love the frog, and share everything with the frog. Do you think the princess intends to keep her promise? And what are some clues that tell us how she feels about her promise and the frog? The princess does not intend to keep her promise. She slams the door in the icky frog's face. The read aloud says she thought that her father would be pleased she had escaped the frog's demands. What does the king say when he hears what has happened? He tells her she needs to keep her promises. Daughter, we must keep the promises we make. The princess is shocked and wants to refuse, but doesn't. What's another clue that tells why she obeys and lets the frog in after all? The king's stern look or serious expression tells the princess she must obey, keep her promises, and let the frog in no matter how she feels. How do you think the frog feels when the princess lets him in the palace? He's happy. He's filled with glee. How do you think the rest of the court feels about a frog being invited in the palace? Well, it's really hard to tell. I'd like to hear your answers on Class Dojo to that last question. In this read aloud, you heard the princess told her father how the frog had retrieved her ball from the well on the condition that she would be its friend and share everything she had with it forever afterwards. Say the word retrieved. If you retrieve something, you got it back. I retrieved my shoe from my dog. Have you ever retrieved an object that you dropped or lost? I'm going to ask you a question. Think about what you might retrieve from that place. And go ahead and answer it in complete sentence with whoever is in the room with you or at the house with you. Have you ever retrieved something from under your bed? I retrieved a sock from under my bed. Have you ever retrieved something from a friend? retrieved my bracelet from my friend. Have you ever retrieved something from your backpack? I retrieved my homework from my backpack. Have you ever retrieved something from a pet? Oh my, I had to retrieve some thread from my pet. Have you ever retrieved something from the floor? I retrieved a piece of candy from the floor. Let's take a look here at this one. Right here, it's the element of fairy tales. And this story is The Frog Prince, right here. Remember, a setting is where and when something happened. So the setting is both where and when. So it's got two different parts to it. The setting, let's see. So the when is the time that it takes place. Okay. Listen carefully while I reread this first sentence of the Frog Prince. Oh, excuse me. Once upon a time, a mighty king lived in a palace in the shadow of a dark, mysterious forest. What words are in that also often begins as the beginning of a fairy tale? So, the when in this case, you heard it there, is once upon a time, right? And this literally means a long time ago. Okay? So let's think about the settings of this story. This story changes place. It begins near the forest, right? It begins near the forest. So, it was a dark, mysterious forest. Near the forest. And then there's a picture of the frog in the well. So, in the well. And at the end, where are they? In the palace. Did you remember that part? I'll bet you did. Let's think about what the main characters were. The old lady in the story, Sleeping Beauty, that old lady she was not a main character. She was kind of a secondary character. She just happened to be part of the story. An important part of the story. So let's take a look at our pictures quick for today's story. There's a lot of people at this table. But the ones who were the main characters in this, of course, the little girl and the frog, they're very main characters. But I believe that the king played a very important role in this story. Don't you think the king did? So let's take a look again at this page we're working on. Characters in fairy tales are both real and magical. So the real characters, the main characters, were the princess, right? And the king. There were other people in there, but the story really doesn't talk about it. Who is our magical character in The Frog Prince? We would say the frog, right? Very good. We're going to fill out the rest of this chart after we finish reading part 2 of The Frog Prince. But for now, conjunctions. Listen, we're going to learn about conjunctions. Conjunctions are kind of a word we use to connect words and phrases together. So we use the word because to join two parts of a sentence. One part tells us what happened, and the other part tells us why something happened or the cause. We use the word because to join, or the cause. I will reread a part of the read aloud, and emphasize the word because as I read to you. The princess began to cry loudly because she was not used to disappointment. Notice that this sentence, the word because, is telling us why the princess is crying. The princess is crying because she lost her ball. The word because tells you why something happened, or the cause. Let's listen to another example. Pedro's mom had to drive him to school because he missed the bus. Why did Pedro's mom have to drive him to school? Pedro's mom had to drive him to school because he missed the bus. Which word tells why something happened? Because. Let's listen to another example. We had no school today because it snowed. The word because tells us why something happened or the cause. Today's learning goal was, I can describe how the princess feels when her golden toy falls into a well, and how the frog feels when the princess lets him into the castle, using words and phrases that suggest feelings. Thank you for joining me today. This was Fairytales, Lesson 4. Until tomorrow, have a great day.